Good morning. So you guys watched the keynote this morning and saw the Minecraft demo. I'll make a little reference to that today. Today, the talk is about Visual Studio and Visual Studio Online extensibility. When we actually started on that talk, the title was 7 words shorter. So I don't know what happened to it over the period of the last 2 weeks. It kind of expanded, but it's mainly about Visual Studio and Visual Studio Online extensibility. My name is Tarek Madkour. I'm the group program manager for the Visual Studio core IDE team, which is responsible for the editing and building and like core shell experience for Visual Studio for all languages. And my first time actually to have multiple speakers on stage, so this is going to be fun. I have Will Smythe from the Visual Studio Online team. He's the program manager on Visual Studio Online. And we're also here with one of our MVPs, Sam Harwell, who is also one of our community members, people contributing to Visual Studio Extensibility. We're all going to be talking to you about how to create extensions for Visual Studio and for Visual Studio Online. So we'll get started. Oh, it's a mandatory slide about apparently evaluations. I hear that the higher the score that you put in the evaluation, the higher your chances are of winning a prize, only for this talk. All right, so we'll just do very quickly why work on extensibility. And just I want to kind of set the stage first. I want to understand how many of you are existing Visual Studio extensibility developers, currently have an extension, created an extension. A handful, so maybe like 10% of the audience. All right, well, that's good. How many of you are interested? I'm glad it's all of you. That's a good thing. All right. Visual Studio Online. Anybody dabbling with Visual Studio Online? Oh, more than I expected. Great. Anybody already creating extensions of Visual Studio Online? 2. All right. Well, you guys are winners. OK. So I'll talk a little bit about why extensions. This session is not a 300, 400 level, you're already an extension developer. I'm going to teach you about all the new APIs and go through them one by one. This is really intended for the majority of the audience here, which is I'm interested in Visual Studio extensibility, want to hear a lot more about it. So we'll talk to you about extensibility, why do it, what you can do with it. We'll talk about both the Visual Studio aspect and the Visual Studio Online aspect. For those of you who are already extension developers, we're going to be talking about some of the new stuff on Visual Studio Online and what you can do as a current Visual Studio extensibility developer on Visual Studio Online. But it's mostly targeted at if you are interested in the topic and you want to know more about it. So that's kind of the level that we're going to be at, just to set expectations. If you're looking at the really, really deep level API stuff, we actually recorded some sessions on video so that I'll refer to them at the end of the talk that you can go and watch online that talk more about the nitty-gritty of the APIs and how to do things. All right? So we'll talk a bit about the high level of what is possible. Then we'll go into 2 sections. One is going to be about the Visual Studio Client and how you can extend that. And one is going to be about Visual Studio Online and how you can extend that. All right, so we'll start quickly with what is an extension. So extensions are basically ways to customize your development environment. As developers, we like to control how our environment works. I mean, we spend a lot of time in our environment. And everything from the colors to the keyboard shortcuts, to certain behaviors and how things do. We like to customize all of those things. Extensions provide you with a way to do these customizations for yourself, but also allow you to give those customizations to people. And you can go all the way from like doing the simple things of adding a little code snippet and giving it to everybody to use, all the way to having a project system that handles Java. So for example, this morning when you saw Minecraft, that Minecraft demo is all about, if you noticed, is about Java development. And it's happening in Visual Studio, but if you also realize Visual Studio doesn't really do Java. So how was it done? Well, extensions. And actually, Sam right here is the one that authored a Java extension in Visual Studio that allows you to edit, build, and debug Java code from within Visual Studio. So when we were looking at creating an extension for Minecraft, instead of redoing that work, we built that on top of Sam's extension to do Java. So kind of extensions building on top of each other. So a nice way to not only customize, but also add and modify functionality in the Visual Studio IDE. The way that those extensions get authored and then go to other people is that you publish them to the Visual Studio Gallery. You could also actually handle them as deployment bits. We call them VSX packages. We can create packages and give them to other people. But traditional way that you would give it to somebody and make it available to a lot of people is by putting it on the Visual Studio Gallery. So as an extension author, we give you access to go to Visual Studio Gallery, upload your extension, manage the updates, change versions, do all of that stuff. And then you'd be able to also on the gallery see the feedback, the ratings for your thing, the feedback that is coming in from user. Eventually, you're going to be able to see a lot more like crash data and things like that. So it's kind of a rich experience targeted at you. But then on the consuming side, every developer, and we've got millions of developers using Visual Studio, every developer gets access to the Visual Studio Gallery, and they can go and browse that and see your extension there, right? And they'd also be able to tell you how good it is or what you need to improve in it, right? From inside Visual Studio, there's also an experience to consume those extensions. So there's an extensions dialog where you can go and view what are the most popular extensions. And we're actually kind of revamping this experience over time. So this is kind of a preliminary experience that we shipped in the last release and kind of keeping for this time around, but definitely looking at improving this experience. And everybody, it used to be only in Visual Studio Professional and Visual Studio Enterprise that they'd be able to get access to those extensions. And starting with about 6 months ago, I think, we released Visual Studio Community. And Visual Studio Community is open to, is a free version, is also open to be using extensions. So now people, if you're creating extensions, every single Visual Studio developer, almost every single Visual Studio developer has access, has the ability to access your extension. So it's a much wider audience than we've ever had before. So we're glad to have that now in our ecosystem. It's a great, great way of enlarging our ecosystem and making all the customizations, all the additions and modifications that you're doing available to every single Visual Studio developer, right? So now Visual Studio Community has that support. And for Visual Studio 2015, obviously, we're continuing with that. In addition to Visual Studio, traditional Visual Studio extensibility, which is what allowed us to give that Visual Studio Client additional features. Now we have Visual Studio Online. And Visual Studio Online is basically the targeted at teams working together. And it's a way to collaborate over code and collaborate over work in general. And we're now enabling you to have extensibility not only in the Visual Studio Client, but also on Visual Studio Online itself. And there are many, many scenarios that kind of span both. They work for you individually as a developer, working on your machine 8 hours a day doing something. But also, they have a component where, as a team, you want to see something. Whether it's a code review tool where you want to see some changes on the developer client and then be able to see something on a team room, or whether it is some analysis that is happening on a continuous integration and you want to be able to see those results in the Visual Studio IDE. And there are lots of scenarios where you're going to see both of them happening together. So for example, this is just a snapshot of my own Visual Studio Online page where I can get to create repositories and projects and share them with other people and collaborate on them. So you can actually customize this experience, and Will is going to talk about that in more detail. And basically, Visual Studio Online covers everything from the code itself and how it works and the build management and configuration of that, all the way to the testing of it and deployment of it and having insights on it, to work item tracking and source code management. It's basically a full experience for the life cycle of your application. So we allow you to customize every single part of that. That's our goal, right? So today, we're going to tell you about how to do this. But why do this? The big question is, why do this? So see already a bunch of motivated people coming here. I'm glad that all of you raised your hand and said who was interested in doing it. That's great. There are many reasons why people are interested in doing this. Number one reason is actually for you and for your team. Like when we talk to developers, why did you start customizing Visual Studio? First thing they say is, there was something I wanted to do. I couldn't do it in Visual Studio. I asked you and you guys didn't do it, so I did it myself. And good. We ask people to tell us what they want, and we have user voice, and we go ask people to vote on things on user voice. And some things you can see it, but not necessarily everybody else sees it, and it just doesn't bubble up to our radar. So you go do it. And you know what? By giving you that ability, you get to create that demand and that need, and then you help all other developers. So this was from a blog post, a comment on a blog post from just a few weeks ago. This person right there was saying, hey, feature request. I would love it if you guys do this. Now, think of it from our terms. Our RC just shipped to you guys a couple of days ago. And we made it available to our MVPs maybe just a little while shorter than that. So 2 weeks ago, we were about ready to finish the last finishing touches on that product and put it out to market. Here's somebody coming at us with a feature request. It would be really nice if Visual Studio 2015 had that. There is no way in the next 2 days we're going to be able to look at this and make it happen. But with Visual Studio Extensibility, you can absolutely make that. What is being requested here is something that is open, easy to do as a Visual Studio extension. Somebody could just do that and then let it go from there. Another reason is for reach. You have a certain, you already have a product that that is targeted at developers, or you want to create a product that's targeted at developers. Visual Studio has millions of people that would be able to see it. So that's one way to get your idea, your thought, out to a lot of people to see. Money and fame. Sam is famous now. How do you get all that audience? And one of the things that you can do, extensions are not only free. There are paid extensions as well, and there are actually a number of companies, some of them I can see here in the audience, who are making money off of extensions to Visual Studio. And it's a thriving ecosystem, and it's something that you can play in as well. If you go in the 3rd floor, you're going to find a booth. Lots of booths for Visual Studio industry partners. And they're all people that are actually participating in our extensibility ecosystem. And they're a great set of people to not only go learn about what is it that they're doing that could help you as a developer, they're a good set of people to also talk to about what their experience is building Visual Studio extensibility solutions. And they would be very, very happy to talk to you about not only their solution, but also what it took them to create it. After all, we're all developers and we're here to help each other. So that's a fun thing to do. Last is creating that sense of community, right? Think of it as and that's one thing that we're starting to do now is you're learning a new skill. And one of the best ways to learn a new skill is to learn it with other developers. And one of the things that we are pushing for right now is for a lot of things to be open source. And you've seen, throughout the keynotes yesterday and today of a lot of stuff being pushed online to GitHub or to some other open source repository. And this is one great way of learning a new skill. So you want to learn about Visual Studio Extensibility, you want to see how it's done, go create an open source project, go start it, and go have people collaborate on it. And the fun thing is when we actually started looking at the statistics for Visual Studio extensions, a lot of them are actually being developed in the open source. Quite a number. In fact, the top 20, about 50% is already open source available to you that you can go learn from, contribute to, whatever it is that you want. So that's another thing that is just enjoyable. As a developer, we like to belong to communities. That's a nice and healthy, thriving community that you can be part of. This is actually a cool extension. I was browsing the community stuff, and a cool extension that I saw was this one. It's called Encourage for Visual Studio. And its sole purpose in life is when you save, it gives you an encouraging message. It tells you, good job, here's something. You need that smile in your day, after working hard on something for somebody to pat you on the back. So this was a pat you on the back. It was created by Phil Hack, who actually works at GitHub. And it was a fun extension. I thought it was really cool. He actually open sourced that extension. And his #1 request was, can you customize the messages that are being there? So he added tools options extensibility, and people helped him do that. And now you could actually read, like if you don't like the encouraging messages and you want some other types of encouragement, you've got that too. So lots of cool things that you could actually build with Visual Studio Extensibility. I told him if I show it here that everybody's going to go download it. It's called Visual Studio Encourage. So encourage you to download it. It's very fun. All right, so that's enough of encouragement about Visual Studio Extensibility. What I really want you to get today is actually how to do that. What is possible in the world of Visual Studio Extensibility? So I'm going to start by introducing Sam. Sam, please come on stage. Sam is a lead engineer at Synopsys working on Coverity. Sam also has a lot of extensions for Visual Studio. Java is one of them, of course, but he's got a lot more, and he's going to talk to you about some of them. He's a very, very experienced developer on Visual Studio Extensibility, so I thought, better than me talking about it, actually get somebody from our community to talk to you about it and tell you how it goes. So Sam, take it away from here.
Thank you, Tarek. So I got a call on April 8th. And they said, we're going to put the Minecraft demo in our keynote. And we're going to put you in a session right after it. And we're going to give you 20 minutes, and we want you to explain how it works. So there's two groups of people in here. There are people that know it is impossible because you're already an extension developer, and the rest of you literally don't care. So you'll be happy to hear that I said no. I would love to come on stage. I love doing extensions, but you know what? This is a group that came to learn. We're going to give them some practical information and show that Visual Studio extensions mean something for them in their job. So I completely turned it around. The demo that you see today, I thought of while I was driving to the airport to come here. I developed it on a nonstop flight from Austin to San Francisco and took a 2.5-hour nap. And you're actually going to want the result. Bold statement. I'm hoping it lives up. There's buttons on here?
There is a red button pointed at anybody's eye.
Oh, I see. All right. So I actually do get this question a lot. There's a lot of people that say, oh, I get this question. It's made up. Now, people really do wonder, what can you extend? You can literally extend anything. The demo that you saw for Minecraft, yes, I made it. I did not make it for Minecraft. I was doing research in Java for a static analysis software at college, and I didn't like anything but Visual Studio. And they said, hey, that looks good for Minecraft. So yes, you can do pretty much anything. On a simple scale, you can create a new command. You can add a tool window. Both of these are very, very common things that actually are pretty easy to do now. Adding a Debugger Visualiser. If you have a particular data type that you want to show in a different way, I've done some really cool things here. I had a data type that was a block of text that was XML, and it was hard to read, and I certainly couldn't read it in the tooltip. I wrote a Debugger Visualiser that could take this XML format and put it into an HTML format that was suitable for display in debugging, so I could quickly get an overview of the contents of this data structure, and plugged it in. That's easy. That HTML visualizer, all I had to do was give it an HTML, a 2 HTML string inside of the class. So I happened to know what the visualizer was. It was a targeted case, and now I was able to debug this type much easier. You can add a refactoring option. This used to be possible but difficult. With Roslyn in early CTPs of Visual Studio 2015, which has since been improved, I did 6 of them in one day for targeted business requirements that are only relevant to the team that I was working on at the time. Manual things that I did during code review, anyone could verify automatically at that point. These are going to be meaningful. You might not use them today. A year from now, this is going to be a standard part of your workflow, and you will probably be using ones that nobody else is just for your project. I've been pushing back on, so I don't work for Microsoft. I work for Coverity. I'm a lead on the desktop experience. I make sure their extensions work well for your environment. I've been pushing back on Microsoft regarding the whole experience for extension developers for a while now. And several teams have come to me, and we've been working to improve your experience from the day you start to the day you ship. And some of the ways that we've done it is new practical templates. Not one project where you create some sample and it has one static set of features, and if you want to do anything else, well, you got some samples there to start with. Good luck. No, it's actually, you can start with nothing, and you can add the features you want. You will see that. And then you have a project that contains exactly what you intended. Open source extensions. This used to be open source samples. One of the most valuable things about an extension is people care about it, they use it, they're going to maintain it, and it's going to stay relevant. These are things that are going to solve problems you care about in ways that you probably want to look at and understand. So Tarek's been working with Heather. Sorry, I don't know her last name. I just recently found out yesterday that they're gathering a list of all these open source extensions, and you're going to be able to quickly reference them in addition to the samples that are already available. Clone and Go. This is something that I actually implemented in combination with Jared Parr, a member of the Visual Studio team. If you go and you want to use one of my open source extensions and you go to GitHub and you fork it and you hit clone, copies it to your machine, if you open it in Visual Studio and hit F5, that's it. It's working. It'll launch Visual Studio, the extension's running, it's ready. It's a particularly valuable experience, and it does not matter what version of Visual Studio you open it in. 2010 plus, they're going to work exactly like what I just said. Many of them use MIT and Apache 2 licenses. This means in addition to being able to reference it, you can take the code, you can use it in your own. Friendly faces, friendly people. I love working with new extensions. Most of the people that use an extension that I had a part of, I didn't create the extension. I didn't come up with the idea. My name is maybe in a footnote. But I enjoyed having a role in making sure it was polished for everybody to use. I'm going to start moving much faster. Targeting multiple versions of Visual Studio. This is absolutely critical at my job. My extension that I'm currently working on at Coverity targets Visual Studio 2005 and newer, and we want a positive experience regardless of the environment that you're in. We have a pretty well-established set of ways that you can extend Visual Studio 2010 and newer, and I'm really working to bring those into the templates for the community to be able to use. They are not part of Visual Studio yet, but they are already open source, and if you're looking for that for your particular project, the information is coming. New APIs are old. It doesn't matter. You use the ones that you need. Most of my extensions target older versions of Visual Studio as well. I use the older APIs. I do want to highlight a few APIs that are coming in 2015 that are making me a little sad that I can't just use those all the time. Roslyn analyzers, they're awesome. Specific targeted diagnostics, whether it's style or semantics, plus refactorings for your project. We currently have probably 100 of them in production. They're awesome. Light bulbs. Roslyn analyzers tie into the light bulb service, but you can actually use the light bulbs to put any information that you want there. Image service. Visual Studio 2015 is the first IDE that's going to have full, complete support for high DPI monitors. All of the icons in Visual Studio 2015 have been reworked. They're all vector graphics. It is gorgeous. We do not have anything on stage that can show it. But next year, we will, and it's going to be there for us. No, it's actually great. Asynchronous service provider. They doubled down on performance again in 2015. It's obvious even in the RC builds that it's faster. The asynchronous service provider allows extension developers to tap into some of those performance advantages. The Common Project System is a project system that's been used internally by Microsoft since 2010. It is getting documentation and a nice public face with 2015. You're going to be able to use it to add new project types to Visual Studio. And the rule-based UI context engine, which I have not used and don't know about, but it sounds cool. Delivery. We have managed to use the VSX Packaging. This is the new packaging for Visual Studio extensions to deliver pretty much any extension you can come up with. You put them in the gallery. Somebody can search in Visual Studio, find it, download it, run it, and in recent builds since 2012, it'll tell you when there's upgrades available. And you click it. It's a per-user installation, no admin required, and you can get the extensions that you need for your job, and you're good to go. Quality, unmatched performance. They continue to work on performance. We've been working on performance for extensions for a number of ways. High DPI support. I mentioned that. Revisiting localization. How many of you have actually worked on a product that needed to ship in more than one language? How many of you have tried to do it with a Visual Studio extension? We're completely rewriting that. It was important at Coverity, and we're working to bring some of that back in so that you don't have to worry about the command localization that we've done in the past. And Tarek mentioned Community Edition. So I have 5 minutes to do what I promised a whole lot of you I would do. So either I'm amazing at it, or I'm going to run maybe 2-3 minutes over, or both. All right. I noticed while I was preparing for demonstrations a common problem. When you zoom in Visual Studio, only the editor zooms, nothing else. In particular, how many of you saw a quick info in the keynote? Going the hover tip. How many of you could read that? You must have gotten there like 6 a.m. All right? My extension makes it where when you zoom, it ties together all the different things that you can zoom. It seemed obvious, right? All right, so yes, this is a small idea, a targeted application, not necessarily something you're going to use every day, but absolutely meaningful. This is a great candidate for an extension. So what I am going to start with is I will go and I will create a new GitHub repository, and we will call it Presentation Mode. Oh. Is there a button I'm supposed to push? Oh, this is on. This part wasn't told to me. All right. Presentation mode for visuals. I can't zoom this window, I'm sorry. You'll be happy to know I'm going to MIT license this, and I will not make it a private repository, and we'll put it on Coverity's organization with a predefined git ignore create. All right, I now have a repository. Create a new solution. This is one of the things. They told me they made new templates for this, and I was like, I don't like using templates. I'm one of those people that I'm not going to use Word to make HTML documents. I don't trust the output. It's a little noisy for me. This is a great template. VSX project. What does it come with? Nothing except a manifest. No references, nothing. All right. Give it a product ID, we give it a product name, and we're good. The license. All right. That's the file that was created by the GitHub extension when I created the repository. We have 2 commands that we want to add. Increase font size. When I do this, everything gets set up automatically. It added all the references that needed to be added. It configured the build so that it's going to package it up as a VS package. It added my VS package. For extension developers, you know what I'm talking about. The rest of you are really happy that you don't need to do this. Simple as that. This was actually a really complicated process. The VSCT file was created. It added my new extension there. We're going to give it a new name. We're actually going to say, when it shows up on a menu, it's going to be called increase font size. We're going to go to the VS package, and I'm going to use another extensibility feature that I was a little sleepy on this. What did I name my snippet? There we go. It's a good thing I don't actually have to type this method, right? All right. Adjusting the font size actually uses several of the Visual Studio APIs that we're not specifically going to go into, but it is going to be open source and you're going to be able to reference this. It's a font and color storage service. I basically told it, get the current font, increase the font size by whatever the change is, or decrease it, and apply it to specific categories. All right. Now I go over to my increase font size. It added a command handler. Like, this is so much easier than it used to be. Handle, increase font size. All right, so when we execute the command, all we need to do is increase the font size, and this is my increase command, so we'll increase it by 2 points. All right. So basically, to adjust the font size for all those different categories in fonts and colors that you would have had to go manually do just to set your font size. All right. Now one of the cool things. Adding a new command, do the same thing for decrease, and it's much faster. So when it did this, it reused the same package, it reused the same command table, and it just created only the necessary additions in order to add this particular command. So the add command feature adds only the necessary requirements to add the specific command. The naming of the package by default is a little weird, but that's okay. All right, so that's it. If I run this, I hit F5. If you're an extension developer, you know that actually this is also something you used to have to configure. Every step that I did today used to be about 10 steps in the past. This was literally an impossible presentation ever before. Go. It's building. It's loading. And I know it works because I'm actually using it so that you could see what I was doing there. I told myself, run without debugging. I did. All right. I have another project. This is another open source project I did just randomly for fun. Oh, you cannot see at all what it is. See, I knew that was going to happen. Something changed in this build. All right, that's it. In addition, you can see that code lens increased in font size. And you can see that the code completion dropdown increased in font size. That's it. All right. Now, this part I practiced, it will go fast. I promised this part to a bunch of people. Visual Studio Gallery. Close this. Oh, don't save my change. Everything is prepared for you when you create a package. So I'm in a new location. All you have to do on the Visual Studio Gallery is upload it. I am uploading a tool. I would like to upload my tool. We'll have to skip this step. I'm missing a EULA, I'm sorry. I will try to have it published by the time you leave here anyway. I will do one more thing, though. Changes. I made changes. Initial extension. Commit and push. Pushing. Live. It is currently live. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks. It was fun.
So you saw how Sam was able to go from think of an idea to go create it, to publish it, create it in the open source, try to put it in the gallery, missing a little thing, but almost there. The thing is, lots of extension developers, a few extension developers are here, and lots of people who are interested in extensions. This used to be a really hard thing to do. I mean, everybody who's worked with extensibility already knows how tricky it is. For this release, we're really putting a big emphasis on extensibility. We're starting with beefing up the SDK, the documentation, the samples, presence on GitHub, open source, getting everything that is open source available to you so you can see it, encouraging you and having a way for you to create your stuff in open source. You just saw the GitHub extension for Visual Studio that we just released with RC. Makes it easier for you to go and do that as well. So the gallery or revamping the gallery. So a number of things that we're doing for making that better in Visual Studio 2015. So it's really a very, very good time to be an extension developer in Visual Studio. So that was focused on the Visual Studio client. The new thing that we're also adding is now with Visual Studio Online, we're enabling new ways of extensibility for the Visual Studio community. And here, Will is going to talk to you about how to do that. Will is also tethered, actually, with a cable to this thing. And I'm serious. He is tethered with a cable. So he can't move. So if he's just stagnant there, you know why.
OK. So what am I go back to? That one? Cool. OK. So I'm going to go through a few slides pretty quickly. I do want to show you some of the new cool stuff that we're doing on the VSO side for extensibility. We've sort of announced stuff over the last couple of days related to sort of this new thing we're calling extensions for VSO. We've already had some MVPs and partners actually start building some stuff, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. We're pretty excited about this because it brings a lot of the same sort of concepts and ideas that you have in VS Client today for building extensions and kind of extending your development environment, and it brings that same kind of concept into VSO and TFS as well. OK. So just at a high level, when we think about how people are building software today, to deliver software, it really requires a lot of different tools for a lot of different teams. If we talk to a lot of teams, we talk to both small teams, we talk to organizations, and a pretty common trend is that they're not just using one stack of tools. They're not just using TFS as the sort of back end to manage all of their different development projects. They're using different tools. Maybe they have a team that's using Trello for sort of lightweight management of tasks and work. A lot of teams doing Java. If they're building Java applications, they need to build those Java applications, so they're using things like Jenkins. Tools like user voice for getting user feedback and support. Tools for collaboration like Slack. People today are using a lot of different tools as they're delivering software. We want to make sure that if you're using Visual Studio Online or you're using TFS, that you can weave together all these tools to kind of create your own sort of perfect development environment. So again, just like in Visual Studio Client, where you can kind of pull in different extensions, maybe you buy something from a partner, or you just get free ones from the, from the gallery, from open source. We want to enable that same type of ecosystem and that same kind of customization in Visual Studio Online, as well as TFS. So we've done a lot of stuff over the last year, sort of on the integration side, because really, when it comes down to it, all this stuff that I just talked about customization and creating sort of a perfect development environment, starts with the ability for you to be able to integrate with our services. So to be able to actually programmatically integrate with VSO through APIs. So what we did last year is we announced, we delivered a bunch of REST APIs. So there's a whole bunch of REST APIs for interacting now with VSO. APIs for getting your work items and builds and that kind of stuff. We also introduced something called service hooks, which is basically a way to kind of send messages between services. So when you do something in VSO, like check in code, you can have it send a message off to another service or to kick off some other workflow. So kind of the sort of extension of that, no pun intended really, is to start really delivering and allowing you to build even deeper, more richer experiences, integration experiences within VSO and TFS. So the stuff that you could do up until now was, I would say, pretty basic. You could build some nice sort of service-to-service integrations through our REST APIs and through service hooks. The stuff that we're announcing at Build for building extensions is really going to enable you to build much deeper, richer integrations. So integrations where instead of users flipping between 4 or 5 different browsers, 4 or 5 different services to get the information they need, it's all brought in together. It's available right in context. So if I'm looking at a build, I don't have to flip over to another window to go look at another service's build information. I can see that build information right in my VSO experience. OK. So I mentioned most of this already. I'm going to skip it for now, just for time. But we have delivered a bunch of REST APIs. We continue to deliver REST APIs. The one really important point to make here is that all the REST APIs that we've developed and delivered so far have been exclusively VSO. But starting with the RC, TFS 2015 RC, all those APIs are available in TFS on-prem as well. And it's the same API set between VSO and TFS. So that's pretty cool. Service hooks, I'm going to actually show you a quick example of this. Yeah, I have enough time to do this. Service hooks is something that we added last year that's also coming to TFS 2015 as well. But it's going to be what kind of enables very quick integration between VSO, TFS, and other services. So that whenever you check in code or a build gets completed, you can have it go drive some other action or some other sort of process on another service. So I'm going to do a quick demo of this so you can kind of get a better sense of service hooks. So switch here. Oh. OK. Is that zooming OK? OK. So how many people use or know of Slack? S-L-A-C-K. OK, quite a few. So we worked with Slack at the end of last year to build sort of direct integration between VSO and Slack. And this is another thing that will be in TFS 2015 RC as well. So what I can do with the integration using service hooks is I can say, hey, let's say I have a channel here, and I made sure to go to an empty channel where no other people were at, because I made that mistake before. And what I can do in Slack is I can say, for this channel, I want to go ahead and set up an integration. I want to be able to say that, let's see, I'll go here. It's like Visual Studio Online is my integration. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me a URL here. So I'm going to pick a channel. It's going to give me a URL that I just need to go plug into VSO. OK. So what I can do now is I can flip over to VSO. And if you haven't seen this before, it's pretty cool. I definitely encourage you to try it out. If you're a project administrator and you go into your admin, there's a new sort of service hooks tab. And again, this will be in 2015 RC as well. Service hooks tab, where you can basically define what we call subscriptions, which is just a way to say, hey, when something happens, do something over here. So we support a whole bunch of services out of the box. This list is going to get bigger as we go. But I can pick Slack, hit next, and then I can say, OK, whenever a build completes, code gets pushed, and our team uses this. We have a subscription that says, hey, when code is pushed to this repo, we want to know about it in our Slack channel. What I'm going to do for this is I'm going to say when a work item gets created without any filters, I want to go ahead and just post a message out to that channel in Slack. OK, so I've set up my subscription for this project. If I now flip back over here, and go ahead and create my new product backlog item, what should happen if everything goes the way it should is I should see a new message pop open in my Slack. So this is kind of a simple example. You could imagine a lot more interesting, sort of complex examples that you can do through service hooks. For example, if you just want to have a custom service that's kind of receiving sort of the JSON payload version of those events and then driving some internal process, you can do all that through the webhook service that we offer. But for a team that's using Slack or using some other collaboration tool, they can get all the sort of notifications as things are happening in the project. So this team can kind of keep up to date with things. So that was Slack, and that was service hooks. People play with service hooks? A few people? OK. Pretty cool feature. OK, so I'm going to flip back real quick so I can talk. OK, I'm good. OK, so I'm going to talk real quick about extensions, and then I'll do a quick demo of that. So just like in Visual Studio Client, we're enabling extensions for VSO and TFS. And you can kind of think of this in the same way that you can think about Visual Studio Client extensions. We, Microsoft, have basically defined a set of places that you can plug into. And we're going to expand this list over time. Right now, the focus is really on web extensibility. So a lot of the places where you can plug in right now, if you were to go kind of enroll in the early preview that we have, is you can plug into a lot of the context menus. You can plug into sort of the upper area there where you can plug in new hubs, as we call them. But where we want to go with this is we really want to expand it beyond those extension points or those contribution points and kind of broaden it to be able to support things like custom build tasks and other kind of sort of server-side functions. But just like with Visual Studio Client, we want to get to the place where we can enable developers to test an extension in their environment. In this case, it's going to be actual production VSO or TFS, and then be able to publish that extension to a central gallery where other users can then find those extensions and easily install them into their VSO accounts. So we have some mock-ups, and I think we'll probably be putting more information out there in the pretty near future about kind of where we want to go with this. But at a high level, you can imagine me as an account user can go in, discover extensions that are available to me either through my corporate sort of gallery or the public gallery, and then be able to install those extensions into my VSO accounts. And then everybody now in my VSO account has access to that new functionality that extension has provided. OK. OK, so I'm going to show this real quick, because we're running a little short on time. OK. Let me flip back here. OK. OK, I'm just going to go through this really at kind of a high level just to kind of give you a sense of things. So a VSO extension is simply a manifest, just like a V6, with content. And right now, that content actually needs to be published and hosted on a server, on a web server, like an Azure website or Heroku, or even a local server if you're developing. But the manifest, just like a V6 manifest, kind of describes the basic information about the extension. It has things like sort of the name, the ID, the version, a description, some other information about the person. In the case of a VSO extension, we have to kind of know where to go actually pull in your static content, like your HTML, your JavaScript, CSS, stuff like that. So you can reference that from your extension manifest. But then really where it starts getting, I think, really more interesting is within your manifest, you also then specify a set of contributions. And a contribution is basically something like an action or a hub or something. And we've defined 20, 25 contribution points that you as an extension developer can basically plug into. And for each contribution point, you have to just specify certain fields, IDs, names, whatever is kind of required by that contribution point. So in this example, and this example actually exists out in GitHub. So if you go to the Microsoft organization out in GitHub, VSO extension samples, you can actually get to this code. This is just a very simple extension that lets you extend the current branches menu in VSO with a new menu option that lets you easily delete a branch. So we don't have like a right-click on a branch option today in the VSO web experience to delete a branch. You have to basically push a delete up to the server. So this is simply just contributing a new action to this Get Branches Tree Actions menu. And it's going to essentially run some code that we have. This is all JavaScript here. We have quite a few other examples that actually are TypeScript. So we have a whole set of TypeScript declare files that we include that you can use to kind of make, to be able to code your application. So if I go and install this, I'll show you what that experience looks like real quick. So if I go to my account level extensions tab, what I can do is I can go and install this extension. So right now, VSX demo. Right now, you just have to simply upload your manifest file. And again, it's kind of referencing sort of your static content. In this case, I have the static content all living in an Azure website. I upload it, and now I've installed that extension into my VSO account. So now anybody in my VSO account has that new capability. And that new capability is, if I flip over here to my code hub and refresh, I should have a new delete action now in my context menu. So this didn't exist before. I can now select it. I get prompted just like the JavaScript has. There's an alert in there. Hit OK. And what this does is it uses our REST APIs actually to go delete that branch and then cause the page to refresh. So pretty simple extension, but I think just like the extensions that you can build for Visual Studio Client, there's a lot of really cool, powerful things that you can do in a very short time that you could never have done before. So pretty cool stuff that you can do there. I wanted to show one more quick example, because this is an app that we've actually made available as well. So it's funny, I was at the booth yesterday talking to people, and I walked over to another booth, and they were talking about VSO, and the comment was, it'd be great if I had like a team calendar for my team in VSO. It'd be great if I could, have all the events that are important to my team and see everything kind of in a calendar view. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. We actually have built a demo sort of showcase extension that actually is just that. So, and this code's all out in GitHub if you want to look at it. But it's basically a very simple team calendar. So if I go back over here to this code and kind of show it to you, this one's a little bit more complicated or complex. But it's the same idea. There's an extension manifest for this team calendar extension. It's contributing a hub, as you'll see here in a minute. And then what's really cool also about this particular extension is the fact that it's kind of been designed to be extended. So to kind of hurt your brain here. I talked about contribution points as kind of the places that you can plug new stuff in into like the VSO web experience. Extensions can also define contribution points that other extensions can contribute to. And that's exactly what this calendar extension is doing. It's both providing functionality, but it's also opening up at a point where other extensions can actually plug in capability or new event sources in the case of this example. OK, so I installed it. Hopefully I installed the right one. We'll find out. So the team calendar contributes a hub, which shows up here sort of under the home area. And what this is a simple calendar view. So we're using an open source calendar JavaScript library called Full Calendar. And what it's doing is it's making REST calls. So it's actually calling the REST API that we have to get all of your sprint dates, and it's showing you those dates. It's getting all my team's day offs and showing that information here. I can add free-form events, and it's storing that information in my sort of account in a special sort of storage area. And then now anybody in my team can go in here, see the event, see what's going on with the sprint. So again, just a simple example. It's out on GitHub under the Microsoft org. If you're interested in seeing the code or actually playing with it, you can actually pull in the extension manifest and upload it to your own VSO account and play with this today if you wanted. OK. So let me continue on here. I wanted to talk real quick. I know I'm running out of time, but I did want to highlight I mentioned that we've had some MVPs and partners actually start using this stuff. They've been using it for a few sprints or a few months now. And some really cool stuff has already been developed. So this first example is from eDev, who's one of our VSIP partners. They built a really cool tool, sort of a baselining kind of analysis tool, that's now plugged into VSO. So you can do they have a lot of really good capabilities that now, instead of sitting sort of outside of VSO or outside of TFS, now sit within VSO. They're here. You can go talk to them and see this in action. Jeff Levinson, former MVP, now a Microsoft PM, built something called a work item visualizer. So this is a really cool way to sort of visually understand linkages between work items. Again, built as an extension, making use of the REST APIs to get all this information. And then just another quick example, VS Anywhere has built sort of this impact analysis tool, sort of extension, that sits kind of on top of sort of your planning process and your work items, where you can kind of define sort of impacts of a particular work item under different categories. They're here as well. Actually, I think they're not here this week. They'll be in Chicago next week. But pretty cool tool. Another good example of an extension that is using this new extensibility framework that we built for VSO. OK. So lots of places to get going here. Lots of places to start here. So we have a sort of a combined VS integration site. So you can go to aka.ms/extendvs, and that'll get you to this extensibility site that we have. So if you're interested in extending VS, you're interested in extending TFS or VSO, that's kind of the place to start. Tarek mentioned that there's a video, or maybe a set of videos, maybe just one video, that got created for sort of a deep dive into doing a VS IDE extension. That's out there now. Visual Studio Gallery, which you probably mostly are familiar with. And there's also a new area that's just come online in the last couple of days out in GitHub. And it's basically sort of the beginnings of a new extensibility community. It's basically going to be an area where if you're building an extension for VSO, you're able to basically register it out there, put it out there. Other people will be able to easily discover other open source VS extensions in that place. So we have the code challenge. Has anyone done the code challenge? Oh, OK. There were like a lot of people in line. I assume somebody had done it. So that's there. If you're interested in playing with like the extension stuff for VSO, it's currently in private preview. If you join the VS Partner Program, you'll get early access to the VSO extensions capability. So if you go to vsipprogram.com/join, or you can just walk over to their booth. There's also a bunch of Visual Studio partners. Do you have any Visual Studio partners here? A few. So there's booths, third floor, kind of near the Microsoft booths. You can see a lot of these tools that have been developed, plus you'll be able to see some of these VSO extensions that have also been developed. OK. So I know we wanted to have a few minutes for questions. We have approximately 1 minute for questions. Of course, we can always stay after, too. Are there any questions, either for me or Tarek or Sam?
Oh. Will we be able to use any of the universal app XAML controls like Ink Canvas from within Visual Studio Extension?
So the question is, will you be able to use any of the universal app controls from inside Visual Studio? You can use, you can use traditional XAML controls. You can't do universal app controls yet. But as some of that stuff, they talked this morning about moving some of that stuff to traditional XAML controls. As some of that stuff shows up, you'd be able to use it in Visual Studio. But not the ones that were made for UAP yet. Good question, though. Yeah, I'd love to see some pen support in Visual Studio. Write that code.
Question?
Yes?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So some of the extensions don't play nice with other extensions. For example, like the VI extension doesn't play very well with resharper or some of the other extensions. So is there like a page where you can discuss about this, or
Yeah. So the question is, some extensions don't play very well with other extensions. For example, you give the example of VI and ReSharper. So there are two ways to deal with this. So one is guidance from Microsoft. So one of the things that we're working on is for extension developers creating some guidance. But another thing, and I think it's probably the most effective way, is the way for you as a customer of an extension to be able to send feedback to extension developers and go tell them about what is a problem with the extension or how it's behaving with one thing or the other. Yeah, so I think that the way that we think that all of that feedback should go should be in the extension itself on its page on the gallery. So there should be a place on the gallery where community should be able to go and say, it breaks with this and it doesn't work with that, and either translate that into bugs or translate that into workarounds or translate that into something. So basically have a place for the community to talk about an extension on that extension's place to collaborate with it. So that's what we're going to be enabling with the updates to the gallery. Yes? And there was a gentleman at the
I'm just curious
mic.
why the title says money. So do you have some tips on how developers can get money out of developing extensions?
I'm not sure I understood. Can you say that again?
Because the title is money and fame. So do you have some tips on how developers can get money out of developing extensions?
Do you have tips about how developers can get money? So I think the best thing to talk to would be to talk about some of our partners that already exist that do make money off of Visual Studio. So walk around the third floor, talk to their booths, and see what their ideas are for a business model. And I think the best thing is to actually have something that developers would want to use. And then your best bet then is get good reviews on the gallery. And what we're going to be working on is making sure that things that do actually get good reviews are featured and are shown. So right now, the gallery is kind of a hidden place, not shown in the rest of the IDE. We're going to bring that front and forward and make sure that if you develop something that is valuable, we'll make sure that developers do see it. So I think that it starts with a good idea, and then it goes from there. The important thing is going to be your business model and how to think about it. But that's less about Visual Studio extensibility and more about any business that you're creating. Yes?
So along those lines, are there any plans to have a centralized payment for paying extensions?
Yeah, so the question is there any plan for commerce so that you can have centralized payment? It's on our roadmap. It's one of the common things that we do. In fact, with the bringing of Visual Studio Online, it's more even of a necessity because with Visual Studio, you could still have that, redirect to my website, go download it and add it. But to actually add it to Visual Studio Online, there's not that equivalent of go download a binary and patch my extension, my Visual Studio with it. So we are actually considering doing that. We're in the investigation phase of what it would take and how it would look. But it's definitely something that's in our roadmap. We want to be able to enable it such that as a developer, you go and say, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want, and handle the payments, handle all of that. So it's definitely something on our roadmap. Yes, one more. Any plans to add Visual Studio Extensibility VS Code? It's not there yet, but absolutely on our roadmap. So it's very interesting because yesterday, as we announced it, what people went to user voice and started adding stuff on user voice, and there, last I checked, there were more than 100 user voice requests for VS Code. Last night, as of 9 p.m., when I looked at it, the #1 request by far was, can you please add extensibility to that? So I know that's definitely on our roadmap, and having it top on user voice is only going to accelerate that, I assume. But. All right. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your presence. Have a good rest of your build.